All right, so I'll just start by talking to you guys face to face. So let's get into what basically animation is. Feel free to open up the outline if you want the text version of this. Animation is essentially just a technique of stringing multiple images together in quick succession, all with small alterations to imply motion. I think everyone's probably seen an animated movie or something, and all that is, and even movies in general, are just a bunch of still images running quickly past your eye, and because each one is a different step, it implies motion. Most modern animation is accomplished by showing frames and quick succession. The speed of the animation is usually denoted by how many frames appear during a second. The standard speed used in, I think, most animation, so far as I can tell, is 24 frames per second. Though through some research, I found that it's also been moved to 25 frames per second or 29.9, 30 frames per second. 24 is PF trash, 24 FPS. Okay. 24 frames per second is useful because it allows the animators to work in multiple frame rates within the main 24. I don't know if you guys have heard any of these terms before, but Spider-Verse, I think, has gained a lot of traction for using things based on this, but they have what's called ones, twos, threes, and fours. Ones is where each frame out of the 24 is a new drawing frame. So there's a different image. So like your hand will start here, that's one frame, and then the next frame out of the 24 will be here, and so on and so forth. Twos is where this hand will be here for 2 out of the 24 frames. And then after that, it'll move there. So there's technically only 12 drawings, but it's still running at 24 memes per second. The same concept applies essentially to threes and fours with 8 and 6 drawings per the 24 frames, but that's essentially how it usually works. Blender runs on 30 frames per second though, so today we're going to be using 30. Yeah, and so stop motion. I don't know if you guys have ever seen a zoetrope. There's a lot of old timey ways that animation and film. You can kind of go back and look at it the early 1900s and late 19th century. It's really interesting stuff. So how are we going to animate stuff in Blender? I'll go ahead and share my screen real quick. Hold on. All right, so you guys should be able to see my Blender now and my guys posed. So in Blender, we're going to have what are known as keyframes. So I'll run through how to do this later, but I'm just going to show what each of it is. These white lines here are my keyframes. So each of these corresponds to a bone, and that logs its position at that certain time. And I'm going to set, so whenever I set the keyframe there, you'll see how the locations turn yellow here to denote that it's a keyframe. And then I'm going to set a second keyframe here, and that logs all those positions there, and those keyframe because it's yellow. And once I have 2 or more keyframes, what the computer is going to do is it's going to find the shortest distance path for each of the bones to move to that position. So from here to here, it's going to find the direct path for every bone to move from point A to point B, and then iterate that over each frame. So it's going to divide that distance into 12 pieces, and then move 1/12 of the distance each frame. So you get a nice, smooth thing. You don't have to animate all this by hand. It's so nice and useful. And yeah, so that's how we have our basic keyframe animation set up. And I'll get into how to actually do this a little bit later in the workshop after we learn some more about animation. All right, but before that, we're going to get into the 12 principles of animation. So the 12 principles were made by, hold on. 12 principles were made by Disney. I have an article here that has some nice GIFs that will go along well for us to learn all this. And I have some guests who are my sister and my brother-in-law that I live with right now. And they are professional animators, so they'll help us go over this and answer some questions. So, yep, okay, cool. All right, so first one is squash and stretch. So as you can see here, this cube, as it's falling, whenever your object is starting to speed up and gain motion, it's going to stretch a little bit, and then whenever it hits the ground, it's going to squash. So that is sort of trying to use the basic laws of physics to help imply more motion within your object. And whenever you're doing it, you want to make sure you keep the volume so like consistent. So think of a rubber ball. Is whenever it hits the ground, it'll squash into sort of like almost a disc shape a little bit, sort of like almost sort of like a rounded disc. And then whenever it bounces up off the ground, it'll be coming up faster than when it hit down because of the elasticity. So it'll stretch. Yeah. There's plenty of pictures I can probably look up, or you can look up to see, but the general idea of it's sort of illustrated here with the stretching and the squashing of the cube. The next one is anticipation. So whenever we do actions in the real world, we don't just do the action out of nowhere. We have to set up the action. So if you were to throw a baseball or something, you have to wind up your throw before you can throw it. You don't just start like this and then the baseball's already gone out of your hand the next second. You have to, start and throw. So anticipation is that telling the audience or whoever's looking at what you're doing to get ready for this action to happen. When you're about to jump, you might crouch down and move your arms to kind of give yourself a fulcrum to lift up or whatever. There's plenty of examples of this. And the cube here, you'll see it lean back to start whenever it wants to tip over. All right, next is staging. So this is a little bit more artistic. I don't know how much we need to worry about this for just like our main character game animations, since the camera is variable or whatever, but it's basically just making sure that your motion guides the viewer's eye across the screen very well, and it just looks aesthetically pleasing and works good. Not our main focus here, but still a very important thing to keep ahead of. Now, this is actually very important to what we're doing. Straight ahead action is what's going to happen when you start. If you've ever tried to do a flip book, usually you'll try and start with the first frame, and then you'll draw the next frame, and then you'll draw the so on and so forth frames until you reach the end of your animation. That's called straight ahead action. So that's when you're going to start at the beginning, and then you're just going to try and kind of wing it frame by frame to get the action to go. Pose to pose is sort of like keyframes. So what you're going to do is you're going to start and pick a couple different key poses or keyframes like we have. And in traditional animation, you would then fill in each of those subsequent bits between the poses yourself. But with keyframes, we can have the computer do that for us. All right, so next is follow through and overlapping action. So this is all about using, make sure we use physics and make sure that we understand that objects can be doing more than one thing at a time. So if you'll see this thing here, is it's sliding across as one action, but it's also bending as an action. So those are two actions happening at the same time, and they're all happening in sort of like one sort of tandem action. So it's sort of overlapping each other, and that's where you get the overlapping action. When it stops, you'll see that it wobbles back and forth with a little bit of elasticity, and that's your follow through. So if you've ever played basketball or something like that, you know how you have to throw and have your follow through on it or whatever. That's sort of the same idea, is just whenever you apply force to something, it doesn't just stop when the force stops being applied to the object. It keeps going because it is to a physical object. Things, try to basically abide by the laws of physics is with that sort of stuff. And this is another one that kind of comes into that. So slow in. So this kind of gets more into the ideas of inertia. So whenever you start, something starts moving, it takes a second to speed up to its max speed. And then once it's at its max speed, it takes a second to slow back down from its max speed. And slow in, slow out basically has the principle of when you're moving an object, you'll see here the little shadow frames, is it has more of the cube drawings at the front and the end, and then less in the middle. So at the beginning of the animation, you're going to see a lot more frames focused on it. And then as it moves, if it gets faster and faster, it's going to be more spaced out across the screen, and less frames are going to be needed for a certain amount of distance. 7 is arc. So an arc is just how things move in nature. Most things do not move from here to here to here to here to here to here to here. Normally, when we wave our hand, it's an arc. When we pick something up, we reach across and grab it and move. It's all sort of like an arc and a line that we move in. So whenever you're trying to animate something that's natural, you usually want to try and keep it to where it's moving in those arcs to keep it in line with the laws of nature. Secondary action. So this is basically just sort of like an overlapping action, but it adds complexity to your image and makes it less boring. So whenever you are watching, like looking at someone walking down the street, they could be sticking their hands in their pockets or looking around or something else, something that helps give life to the object being shown. And secondary action can help make it look like it's not just a stagnant thing doing one action at a time. It looks a little bit more interesting. 9 is timing. So here on the top, you'll see that the timing on how each frame is spaced here is that it's sort of like slow in, slow out, where the first one here shows equal distance for each of the frames. But if we give it a little bit of change the spacing some so that there's a little bit more at the front and the end and less in the middle, it looks a little bit more fast and smooth. Exaggeration. So exaggeration is all about just making your things pop, sort of. So if it follows the laws of physics a little bit too much, it'll be kind of boring and stagnant, a little bit true to life too much. So to make things seem to pop off the page and or the screen or whatever, and just seem more engaging to the eye, you would like to use exaggeration. And you can see that here exemplified with the extra lines that come off and the things and the exaggerated action. Like we could see this just kind of slightly opening its mouth and snipping up the thing like maybe a frog would in real life. It's so fast that you can't even see it almost. But here it's a lot more exaggerated, and because of that, we get the full picture whenever we look at it. 11 is solid drawing, and this kind of comes down to us for solid modeling. So whenever you do something, you want it to be anatomically correct or something like that. So I mean, my model in there is not the best model out there, but it does follow the proportions of the human body somewhat. So whenever you see it move, it looks convincing because that is what a head looks like, most more or less. This is what arms look like, and this is what legs look like, and that's what a butt looks like, So whenever we want to do that, we want to make sure that it looks correct. And if we're not using a rendering engine or whatever, lighting and shadow and color is also something that you want to keep a head on, because when the computer does a lot of that for us already, but whenever it's not, it's important to make sure that when things are moving, the shading, it's moving under light and with different things around it. And you want to make sure that whenever it does move, the shadows and the shading will move along with it. And the final is appeal. So this is all about just making sure your animations are likable. And this is more useful for things like character animations. So if you're going to have a video game character that you want people to like, adding some appeal to them by making them easy to read designs, making them fun to look at, open, engaging, using a lot of the other what are they called? Principles to help make them look more appealing. Will help your sell your characters to your audience, or sell your animations to your audience. All right, so that is the 12 principles. I have listed out the descriptions from that article in the outline here. So if you need to, I have the link to the outline of the article itself if you want to look at that with the GIFs, and I have the descriptions if you are too lazy to click on a link. No worries. So now we're going to switch over to our Q&A, and I'm going to invite my sister and my brother-in-law to come speak for us. So hold on 1 second.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm fantastic.
Okay, cool.
I'm gonna have to check.
Oh, yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, Mitchell. Hey, everybody. It's nice to meet you.
And all of you are, how many of you actually want to do animation for like an actual living? Just by show of hands. Yeah, okay. Or something that people are into.
It's all right if the answer is no.
We-
It's a good thing to know, even if you're looking to get into some other part of like the development cycle, or even if you're just doing the design side. Probably a good idea to kind of just spell a little bit of our experience.
Yeah.
So Karen and I both went to school for media arts and animation, graduated 07, 08. Happier times. I've worked multiple indie game studios, working on both 2D and 3D productions. Again, mostly small stuff, so a lot of work in Unity, a bunch of stuff in what is now Adobe Animate, it used to be Flash. And I've also done stuff just hand-drawn 2D. Right now we're actually kind of doing something exciting. We've got an animated short that we're producing for folks. Yeah, Flash is one hell of a thing. Yeah, that's been primarily our experience. We've been pitching animation shows around, and try to stay on top of a lot of the animation software and just general techniques that come up. Certainly, I've never gotten up to like AAA level animation. In a lot of cases with that, you're going to be dealing with mocap, so motion capture data. So that's where I'm assuming most people have a general idea of mocap, but just to, make sure mocap is the little dot tracker suits.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically used to encode the joint position for each joint, its orientation, its position, and basically do a frame by frame capture of that data, which can then be imported into something like Blender, and then polished and cleaned up and applied to a rig.
Yeah, so if you guys are interested in doing mocap technology, animators are still required for most projects on that, because otherwise it's going to look like, yes, The Last of Us. I actually got the chance to meet a lot of the voice actors and actors in general from Red Dead Redemption, where they do a ton of mocap, and yeah, Death Stranding as well. So video games make a huge thing about this. But I think we all have seen those bits of animation in these video games where it doesn't look right. Like it kind of looks like a Weekend at Bernie's dead person kind of walking. And a lot of that is because there's a lot of nuance that you lose within the mocap.
Yeah. The Uncanny Valley is a good way to describe it.
Yeah, and for anybody who doesn't know what the Uncanny Valley, yes. So the Uncanny Valley is the idea that the closer to human it looks, there's a certain point where if you've got, let's say that this over here is Bob from The Incredibles. Everybody's seen The Incredibles, right? Yeah. And then over here is an actual human. The closer you get,
all the way down here, is like an industrial robot.
Yeah, and then down there is an industrial robot. But the closer you get to here, there's this valley that kind of dips down, and the closer you get to the real person, the more likely it is that people will be creeped out by it.
Yeah. And this is actually a really interesting phenomenon. Not to get on too high of a horse on this. We're so used as humans to seeing other people, real live people, that we have subconsciously, as we grow up, built a catalog of things that we recognize as normal human stimuli versus not normal human stimuli. And it's like an evolutionary level thing. So when we see something which is sort of an abstracted humanoid, we're much more likely to say, okay, I can suspend my disbelief and say that's an emotional being that I can attach, my feelings to, and I can get invested in. But once you start moving more and more towards the human, get towards like deep fake territory, that's when it's like, oh no, something's not right here. I can't put my finger on it, but something's just not right.
Yeah.
And your brain just spends so many cycles, basically, like trying to chew through, why doesn't this feel right?
Pretty much. It's sort of like another good example of bad mocap would be, you guys might have seen the Polar Express when you were kids, like watching it now, so much of that was mocap. And you see, there was really, really, really early mocap. And it just looks very strange in that way. So, I mean, I'm sure all of you have seen like some of those robots that are supposed to be like, you know, artificial intelligence and have human-like faces, something akin to, like, for lack of a better word, like those sex dolls you see. They're just like a little creepy. That is what we call the Uncanny Valley. And the reason why we need animators within the Uncanny Valley is because they provide the additional life to it that makes it more lifelike and more interesting and more fun to look at and more human, honestly.
So in terms of like the concepts that we just talked about, exaggeration is one that an animator can use to kind of punch up mocap data, to like really add in that extra little bit that in real life no one would really expect to see, but when it's translated into a captured medium, you kind of just need that little bit of extra punch in order for it to be sold.
A good example of mocap, which also had animators working on it, would be Gollum.
Yeah, that was a good example.
The
Lord of the Rings series.
Thank you. But yeah, so additionally, I'm trying to think of, again, most of my stuff wasn't in 3D, but it was also in 2D. But Alan's also worked in stuff that is 3D. So
yeah, well, I do want to spend a moment just talking a little bit about 2D, because I think a lot of folks here are interested in indie dev, and obviously 3D, as you guys are probably starting to discover, takes a lot more resources and a lot more time and energy to get right. Things like Unity, Unreal have definitely made it a lot easier, but at the end of the day, it tends to be a lot easier to get a small team together to do a 2D project.
Yeah.
And excuse the squeaking.
Sorry.
It's our corgi.
That's our dog.
There's really cool projects like Cuphead, where part of what made Cuphead was the fact that it was actually done with like traditional frame by frame hand drawn animation, which is not normal.
No, it isn't normal, but the effect that it came out with was something that really a lot of people found very appealing. So when the 12 principles talk about appeal, Cuphead has every single one of those principles, and it's very, very easy to spot them because of just how exaggerated.
Right.
Yes, frames. Actually, the keyframes in 3D are taken in a holdover from 2D.
Yeah.
So just for anybody who needs a refresher, the keyframes are the moments. They're like they're
your core poses.
Yeah.
They're the ones you use to sell the story of an emotion or an action. Mm-hmm. So if Karen and I were going to high five,
it would be. Well, and then that. Yeah. So it would be. Yeah. So keyframe.
Yeah.
Then
no. This would be
then keyframe.
The one here. This would be considered a breakdown.
Yeah.
This is a breakdown. So this is where you've gone from
keyframe,
story point to story point, and here in the middle, this is how we got there. This is sort of the path to get there.
And everything in between the breakdowns and the keyframes are called tweens.
Yeah. Or
in-betweens.
And the advantage of being able to use a computer to do animation is the fact that you don't have to do the tweens yourself.
Yeah.
One of the biggest sinks of time and energy in traditional 2D animation is the fact you have to go through and draw each and every single one. what I wanted to bring up with 2D animation is there are a lot of tools out there now that allow you to do things not the Cuphead way.
Mm-hmm.
Sprite-based animation is one which is probably the oldest style. Like when you're talking about the stuff that the original Super Mario game was, that was a sprite, which is basically a very small bitmap image. So just a very small grid of pixels, and that was largely boiled out of the memory requirements. I was actually about to talk about interpolation-based animation. So interpolation-based animation done is basically what you're doing in something like Blender, where you basically have multiple keyframes, and then you're basically setting an interpolation path, which is basically how you chop up the time and say, all right, do I want to take a slow, sharp, slow ski slope to get there, or do I want to get there fast first? I'm sure Mitch will show you guys later, but once you've set up your keyframes, you actually have these little handles, and the little handles allow you to that kind of interpolation. That's I'll get into that one. I will get into that, because that is that's a completely different thing from what I was just rambling about.
See, this is the thing when you're working in software and hardware. Sometimes people borrow different terms, and then you're just like, "Damn, I don't know which one you're talking about."
Yeah. Interpolation, for those who are wondering where the current crossover is. Interpolation is just how you break up the space in between two milestones. So the article that's going around right now, it's using Mulan a lot as an example. And it's pointing out how what it looks like when you go from 24 frames per second to 60, and let the TV do that kind of on its own. Personally, it doesn't bug me too much, because I'm someone who's grown up playing lots of Vidya games, and I'm used to a fluid frame rate. The fact that it's not chugging along at 2 frames per second is fantastic for me. So it doesn't bug me too much, but I do sympathize with the people who get twitchy about it, because
like me.
Yeah.
I hate it.
When you have 2D animation, because you have to save on your time, your energy, and the amount of frames you can actually use, and the amount you can actually spend money on, the artists get creative on how they're going to cheat emotion between point A and point B. And part of the life of 2D animation comes from how you go about cheating the eye on that. It's sort of like the whole idea that once you know how a magic trick works, it's no longer does anything for you. Same general concept with the interpolation. Interpolation technology like that really kind of got added to TVs to satisfy sport fans, like live sports fans who wanted to see like every single bit of action, even if it was only getting broadcasted at 30 frames per second. Smear frames are a great example of how those creative cheats. And a smear frame is basically a frame of animation that basically simulates motion blur.
Yeah, have you guys seen, maybe you guys have seen this meme going around of it's like seeing an angel, in like Renaissance paintings versus an angel like pictured in the Bible, and the one pictured in the Bible is like SpongeBob. It's a shot from SpongeBob, and it's got his eyes just going in a circle. It's
a smear frame.
That is a smear frame. There's actually a great I think it's a Twitter account or a Tumblr account, which is nothing but smear frames. That's all they post.
Yeah.
And they look bizarre. They look so freaking bizarre. But the cool thing is that it just adds so much pop and snap to the animation, and it just makes it so much easier to understand what's going on, and it just adds that, smears are, Scooby-Doo smear frames.
So if I can pontificate a little bit more on the 60 frame thing.
Yeah.
First of all, it's amazing that we're at this point with computer vision, real-time image processing software, that we can even be having this debate over whether we want the computer to be filling in the blanks between 24 frames and 1/60th of a second in real time, because we want that extra information. Right now, those algorithms are basically looking at things from, all right, I've got point A and point B. I'm going to interpolate it linearly. And remember how we were talking about arcs earlier on. When I was talking about sort of like the curvy interpolation, one of the keys of animation, and there was a little bit of that with the ease and ease out. Animation operates on curved time as well. So basically the time between two keyframes is curved. You have sort of some of it compressed in here, stretched out here, and compressed in here. When you're going from 24 to 60 automatically with something like an upscale, what it's doing is it's just saying chop, 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 chop linearly. And it's ruining that fluidity.
That's why if you ever watch like, you know, there's a video going around of a Tom and Jerry cartoon that has the updated interpolation, and just how everybody looking at this has sort of looked at it and said, this looks weird, something's off about it.
I don't think I've ever heard of
No,
these.
I have not.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, we'll have to check it out. I'm trying to think of anything else that I can always say that whatever medium you're using, whether it's 2D or 3D, for the love of God, please label everything and make sure that your filing is very clear and very easy, because
naming your layers, naming your bones, naming your files under whatever the
have a file naming label convention.
Layer 101B. Yeah, no.
No, that's not gonna work.
I do it to her all the time. So because we work together on a webcomic project.
Mm-hmm.
It's kamikazecomic.com. Anyway.
Why?
Because he told me to plug us. But I keep getting distracted from this point. There are a lot of great animation tools for 2D animation.
There you go.
That are based around the idea of using bones and keyframe animation, like you're going to be exploring in Blender. A couple of them right now. Yeah, Blender actually does allow you to do it. Mm-hmm. And Blender actually does have 2D,
tools.
Well, they have tools, but they also have a grease pencil tool, which basically allows you to mesh the 3D aspect in with frame by frame, which is really cool.
For any of you who are working in sprite-based, you can always use Photoshop. Actually, also has an animation capabilities, as do a lot of others. But for me, as far as the stuff that I've done in the past, the majority of game things have been based within either Flash or Animate or Photoshop.
Right. And Flash/Animate, the way it works is a symbol-based system. So you'll define a symbol of artwork, so just like a chunk of artwork, and basically just create sort of like a chunk that you're squashing and stretching and moving back and forth. And if you create sort of that, it's almost like making one of those. You remember those like little puppets you could make in, I think it was like elementary school. Maybe this was just my weird ass elementary school, where you'd basically take like paper and cut it out, and then you'd have a little fold out tacks, and you'd make the joints.
Move around, so you'd have like a little puppet.
You'd have a little puppet. Okay, it would be weird ass elementary school.
Look, it was the 80s. Needed to do something.
Anyway, so Flash, this whole symbol-based system is still very much around, and something which is getting a lot more use now is systems where you have sort of almost like rigged meshes of 2D artwork. Spline 2D uses this. the VTuber crew, or Trent uses this, where they'll have like a generally manga
Mhm.
character, and basically it's rigged, but it can rotate side to side, and it looks like it's almost 3D. It's pseudo 3D. What's really useful about that is you can have a very painterly look, or whatever art style you want to have for your character artwork, but you can have all of the workflow efficiencies and all of the computational and physics reactive efficiencies of a bone-based system. So that's something to look into as you go on as well. I think Cocos 2D, most major game platforms now have plugins to allow this to work together.
Definitely.
Anyway, that was the point I spent like 30 minutes trying to get to.
Do any of you guys have specific questions you'd like to ask us? Or is there anything you'd like specifically to know about working within the game industry, or how things are handled in this COVID continuity? VR for animation and movies and other media. I think it's awesome. I think there's a lot of interesting ideas that can be explored. The biggest concern that we have, a lot of the animation community has with VR and film, animation and film communities with VR, is that they're not sure how to, they aren't sure how to sell it. That's the big thing. They aren't sure, but we have the Oculus and a bunch of other VR rigs. Right. But
cost has been a big problem for a lot of folks.
Cost has been a huge
problem. It's not just
problem.
The cost of the set, it's the cost of whatever rig it takes to render it. Now that's getting better. Obviously that's getting better. The fact that you have things like Samsung Gear, and I'm already dating myself at this point. But the fact is that the cost is coming down. The question is, will it continue to sustain itself while we're learning all of the rules of the road with VR? Because there are certain things that you can't quite do in VR that you can do on screen.
Yeah.
Some of the other questions, is Maya or Blender easier to use for 3D animation? That is a completely personal preference. I am sorry to give you that complete cop-out of an answer, but it's completely personal preference. The majority of my experience is with Maya, which is a beast of a program.
Yeah, Maya is, Maya and I do not like each other. It is a program that is incredibly difficult to use, and it's always updating. The tools are always changing, and there's just so much of it.
I think if I was starting over now, I would do what you guys are doing and focus in on Blender, because it's come so far since when I was first tinkering around with it in like 2008.
Yeah. I do know that the majority of if you're looking to do 3D 3D modeling and animation within a lot of game spaces, they are having, at least last I checked, they're using Maya a lot. Now I focus mostly in 2D myself, but Maya tends to be the standard that film, TV, animation, and
cinema 4D,
and cinema, 4D, all that sort of stuff. If that tends to be the standard. However,
AAA's use Maya.
Yes. It's incredibly complicated. If it's something I think you guys should at least have some understanding of, because if you're looking at a lot of the job prospects out there for entry level stuff, they are going to start by asking you what programs are you using, and if you're not proficient at least enough in Maya or whatever program they want you to use, you're kind of
right.
And shot.
Generally speaking, folks like Maya tend to offer at the very least a discounted version for students. Oh, it's free for students? Yeah, by all means.
Get that stuff. If it's free for students, go for it. Hop on it.
And even if you only get it and use it enough so that you've crashed it 50 times, what should only take you a week, Yeah. It was not the most stable software the last time I used it. It's worth at least getting yourself familiar with how it's laid out. And most of the concepts you're going to find in Blender, you're going to find in Maya. Like there's only so many ways to slice apart a polygon and represent it.
Yeah.
So Maya has less of a reliance on modes than Blender does. But in a lot of ways, they're almost toe for toe as far as features go.
So the next question is, do they give you laptops to work from home, or are you in charge of your own software? So
this is a great thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Because this is something which happens in game space. It happens in animation. It happens pretty much anywhere you have art and business that meet up recently. There has been, in our experience, a big tendency for studios to list everyone as freelancers.
Contract.
So you're a contractor. Now, that does not necessarily mean that they're going to screw you over. Some folks will, or some companies will do the whole, you're a freelancer thing because they have a short gig that they need you to be a part of. They can't afford to have you on their payroll 365 days a year, even if they don't have a project. So in that case, they will have sort of this short thing, but they will provide the machine for you to work on. There were several animation productions I was part of where I would go in every day. Obviously, this was in 2020, to an office, sit down in a room with several hundred other people, and crank away on my brand new shiny iMac or whatever the hell they gave me. And then I would go home and then use my own computer at home. I don't think I was ever issued a piece of hardware by a studio or anything like that. Some bigger AAAs might do it, especially if they're expecting you to be in and out of the office a lot or working remotely a lot. And I think post-COVID, you're going to see an awful lot of that.
Yeah, I think you're going to see an awful lot of stuff that you guys can take home. I will say that when you start in the business, a lot of this also depends on who you're working for and how big their production studio is. So my first job, period, in the industry was at a game studio where I had to have my own computer. I was a contract freelancer, and I didn't have an actual drawn tablet, the Cintiqs and stuff that I needed at that time. So they went ahead and bought that for me, but it was the property of the company. And it was great. I really enjoyed it. It was fun to work with. I actually still use one, but it was something that when that job was over, I realized, one, how much that changed things. And then two, it was like, oh crap, I actually need to get one of these. So, but then also you have to remember that in addition to being a contractor, that means that you're not getting a lot of the full-time things that many other people get. So you're not getting benefits. So you can throw medical insurance out the window because you're likely not going to get it. So that means all of that's going to go on you. That also means that you're likely going to be working overtime. And sometimes that overtime is not paid unless you are part of a union or a guild.
So I think the big takeaway I would get from it is just make sure whatever gig you get approached for, just go into it with both eyes open.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you realize, what they're asking from you. What they're promising to you, and just make sure that they're actually giving you what they're promising.
Also go on Glassdoor for sure, and then continue. Everybody talks about everybody now.
Just pause there. Does everyone know what Glassdoor is?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk.
All right, let's
So-
back up a minute.
Glassdoor.com is a website where folks who recently left a company can basically leave almost like a Yelp review for working in that company. And like Yelp reviews, sometimes it can be a little biased, but it's also a good way of kind of getting a look behind the employees only sign
Mhm.
to actually find out what it's like working there.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing that I would suggest for anybody looking for any job is set up an appointment or some kind of thing so that you can talk to someone on staff who works there regularly. Somebody who's in the trenches, who'll be in the same area as you. So if you can get a hold of them and say, hey, can I just pick your brain for like 5 minutes over coffee? The majority of people will. I just realized you can't do that because COVID. You can kind of do it.
Can't do it this year.
Can't do it this year, but
I can drink coffee on this side of the screen. You can drink coffee on that side of the screen. We pretend it's the same Starbucks.
Lord. Anyway, so you will. Anyway, I definitely suggest trying to get in contact. Twitter is a great social media tool to use.
Or whatever you want.
Whatever you want to use, but in case a lot of artists that are in the animation community are on Twitter and they're incredibly active on Twitter, because that's in many cases where a lot of us are getting our jobs. It's just by putting our portfolios on Twitter, letting people know about it, following specific people, interacting with them. A lot of friends say, well, what's the point of Twitter? How do you use Twitter? And it's really a conversation. Literally just jump in there. And for people who have social anxiety, it can be really, really difficult. But sometimes, but it's really worth trying out because it's a great place to not only learn, but also to find, hey, these are resources that you can use. They have mentorship programs. They have entire hashtags that are just about, okay, how do we make sure that we're getting better representation behind the scenes in our Inktober.
So Ethan had a good question, which is when you're working on a project, is everyone working on the project required to use the same software? Or do you find people importing stuff back and forth? Generally speaking, I'd say that's scaled a little bit more to how big the job is. If it's like a little scrappy indie project, then as long as you can import in a Collada file or pass back and forth something which Unity can digest, then it basically, if it gets done, it gets done. And as long as there's no like import errors that a program is introducing into the chain, there's less of a care because it's ultimately it's about the tools that you know how to use and doing it well. I know plenty of folks who work in things like Paint Tool Sci as their primary 2D painting or drawing program, but they'll export it out as like a PSD.
Or do the same thing with Clip Studio.
Right. Now with a larger production, especially one where you're using like company machines, then yeah, they're going to have a specific set of software that they're paying for, or at the very least, they're making sure that everyone's on. And they're going to be a little bit more spooked if you start juggling back and forth between programs. Now, in some cases, you need to do that because let's say you need to use a very specific set of functionality from, let's say, Marvelous Designer to design clothes for an interactive character. Well, you have to go to Marvelous Designer to do that.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Oh, what's your favorite? Okay, wait. I'm not an artist, but with a large team, how do you keep the art and animation style consistent? Oh boy, consistent throughout the episode or show because everyone has to do their own way to draw. This is where something called turnarounds come in.
And style guides.
And style guides, especially when you're in 2D. With 3D, you don't really have to worry about it too much, but you do have to worry about things like.
I don't have to worry about 3D if you have like multiple texture artists or multiple models.
That's true. Like,
Yeah.
and you know, there will be some, like, we need specific shaders here, or we need specific,
Right.
you know, we need these
Yeah.
specific colors here, that kind of stuff. And that's actually something that we're struggling with right now with a project that we're working on, because we are doing a 2D animated short based off of
Yeah.
the comic that we create.
And it's one of the first times where we're on the other side of the table. We're
Yeah.
the ones who have paid for it. We're the ones who are commissioning it from an animation studio.
Producing, basically.
Yeah, we're the ones producing it. We also, we also have all the character designs. We've designed out the art style in the world, and we've, been doing that for years.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're communicating that to the studio, and there's with any project, there's always this like handover challenge.
Challenge.
Where just trying to get someone up to speed on what you're thinking
Mm-hmm.
can be a huge set of landmines you're not expecting.
Exactly. Learning how, I would actually suggest that if you guys get the chance, I don't know if you have seen Mitchell and his whiteboard. So he has a whiteboard that he kind of carries around sometimes. This is something that he started to do when he was fairly young, and he started using it that way, from what I understand, because he has one and it's glorious. He started using that because Alan and I, whenever we started to explain stuff, we'd take out like a piece of paper and we'd kind of doodle to sort of get across our idea. Just learning how to doodle, just to get across a basic understanding of what you're trying to communicate, is really, 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 really helpful. So I definitely suggest that.
So to the larger question of how do you make sure everyone's on the same page. So basically you go through what's known as an onboarding process. And this is where you more or less create almost like a, not a college course, but like really almost like this, like a set of workshops where you go over the art style, you go over the key parts of it, go over why the art style is done in a certain way. And this is generally the job of the art director or whoever's leading an art team, if you have an art team. They're really the one responsible for combining everyone's different style and figuring out, all right, how can we unify this and take everyone's strengths here so that we can end up with a style which looks consistent at the end, but still allows me to use all these different individuals, with different styles. And ultimately, the reason why you see like small indie studios like almost always have the same art style is because that's the formula of their art team, which works well for them.
Mm-hmm.
They've hired folks who fit that formula. So if you are, someone going into the art side of it, you're going to get kind of filtered through art tests and the like to say, can they fit the art style? I actually got my first gig in 2D animation by basically doing an art test in Adobe Illustrator. And I never used Illustrator before. They basically said, okay, so we've got these pieces of concept art for what we want the show to look like, but and we think that you're doing something like it in Photoshop, but we're not seeing anything here from Illustrator. Can you do Illustrator? And it's like, give me a test file in 24 hours and we'll find out. And apparently it worked.
Yeah, apparently he just sort of like made the entirety of the background and world of the show.
Anyway.
Speaking of which, that is something that I do want to sort of touch on, is that animation isn't just making things move. Animation is, much like game production and game design, is that you have multiple roles that are being filled at one point. Right. So animation is created by a team of multiple artists that aren't just animators. So you have your prop designers, your set designers, layout, you have your riggers, technical artists. special effect artists are actually a huge thing.
Right.
Because when we say special effects, it's stuff like, okay, we need smoke, we need fire, we need,
Right.
environmental effects.
Yeah, and to map this over into 3D, particle effect
Effects.
development it's a thing. Yeah, there are libraries for a lot of this stuff, but ultimately, in a lot of cases, you do need to have someone inject their own, creative vision into it, and that is a skill set that you can find a role in.
Yeah, I would definitely suggest if you guys have the opportunity, and if COVID stops being a thing, there's a great conference I think you guys would get a lot out of, and that conference is called SIGGRAPH. And it's usually it's a little pricey, but it is definitely something that if the school will help you get there, that is amazing, because all of the largest creators of, like, you have Maya there, you have Unity's there, you have all this experimental technology which is on display for you to sort of play around with and see how it works. You're going to workshops, you're going to panels where you're talking with major artists who are working in this sort of thing. So the year we went was when Ratatouille came out, and we learned that one of the hardest things for Ratatouille to deal with, and the animators and effects artists there, was just cutting vegetables. It's like, so we have to show people cooking, and we need to cut the vegetable, but when the vegetable is cut, it can't just be hollow in the middle.
Right.
So, or figuring out how to actually.
So, okay, I'm gonna get.
He's gonna get.
So, first of all, SIGGRAPH, it stands for Special Interest Group Graphics. It's part of the Association of Computer Machinery, which is the international. So a lot of what you're going to find there is a lot of the technical stuff on computer graphics. So a lot of rendering techniques, a lot of computer vision techniques. This is where those were really living. One of the things they were really proud of in Ratatouille
go ahead.
What was the subsurface scattering shader that they were using. So subsurface scattering is, when you have something like a marshmallow and you can kind of see like light leaking in through the side of it when you kind of split it aside, like you'll see it's like almost like a little translucent.
Or you'll see like an ear and there's a bright light behind it.
Yeah, so it's
kind
a
of
like
pink.
a little pink. That's light. The photon's like not only just hitting the surface, but bouncing through like a pachinko ball and then coming out the other side as a color. That at the time of Ratatouille was the kind of thing that you really could only do in a render farm, only with machines which were spending, several minutes per frame of animation. Now subsurface scattering is a part of every physical base renderer, Unity, Unreal. It's considered, you're not considered a modern rendering engine unless you have real-time subsurface scattering. So it's just incredible how fast that's become a thing. But yeah, the online virtual conference, if there's any kind of way to get access to any of the panels there, it's a lot like GDC. And if you are at all interested in rendering technology or anything along sort of how all of that works, or you just want to just take a peek in and see what the uber nerds in that world are doing, it's a great thing to look at.
It's definitely a great thing to look at. And it also gave us me a lot to think about, because I was a 2D artist in sort of this, boom of 3D space. And it was kind of like, where the hell do I fit in here? And so that was a little rough for me, because it kind of felt like I felt like a very old man in GameStop wondering, what the fuck is all this?
Really interestingly, at that conference, one of the little technical demos, like the main hall, was the computer vision image processing technology, like the very early version of it. They eventually used with Klaus.
Oh, really?
So with Klaus,
if you haven't watched Klaus and you need something
beautiful.
wholesome, and you need something kind of Christmassy but not too awful.
Think Emperor's New Groove, but Christmas.
Yes, and it's wonderful. Please watch it. It's great.
So that was hand drawn 2D, but it was using a new piece of tech developed by the studio where they only had to draw the keyframes again. They drew the keyframes, and then they could basically tell the computer, all right, I want you to give me your best guess on what the in-betweens look like on this. And if you're wrong, I'll tweak it along the way for you, which allowed them to save a huge amount of time and money, which is generally the thing which kills an animation production. But yeah, it's a way of seeing technology which won't necessarily start to become commercialized.
Well, will start to be showing up in the near future.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Because I don't want to take too much more of Mitchell's time. Thoughts, comments, bricks?
Tomatoes.
Tomatoes. You're very welcome. Thank you for listening to us blather on. And if you get the chance, check out our comic.
Yeah. Can you post in the
I'll-
chat and say where we can find your stuff?
Yeah.
And actually, they're sharing. Pretty sure you guys can all still see the outline, right?
Yeah.
You can just pull it up on here.
Oh,
Yeah.
we can pull it up on the outline.
There you go.
Look at you. You have an outline.
Okay.
I'm
So does anyone here read webcomics on Tapas?
No one knows what tapas is,
All right.
Alan. We're
All right.
Niche medium. You're a niche
okay,
medium.
never
It's
mind.
okay.
We'll just go to Kamikaze Comic. Here we are. And if you want to get started at the beginning, hit that button right there. And it's basically, it's Dust Bowl Cyberpunk. Think Mad Max meets Batman Beyond. And we've been doing it for 5 years. We also have books available. Please support our bad habit.
Please support this. Look at these. These are Alan's backgrounds.
Yeah.
So one of the cool things that Alan does here is he actually 3D models all of the backgrounds.
Except that one.
You didn't. That was
That
freehand.
was
That's
freehand.
right. But he 3D models a good deal of the backgrounds and then vectorizes all of this and then colors it based off of there. So
Yeah.
it's neat watching Alan work. Also, we have a 3D model of this here.
Yeah. So
Yay.
in order to save time and energy, because I'm a lazy person at heart, for most of the vehicles, most of the props, we've actually created 3D CAD models of all of these things. So basically, it's a piece of software a lot like Blender called SketchUp, and it allows me to just quickly build mechanical things. So like, that shot right there.
The first panel.
Yeah, that first panel, like that is a 3D set model I built, and then basically it's an artisanal hand done shader. That's what we're seeing here. This is an artisanal hand done shader, a very slow coffee powered shader.
Anyway, so this is Kamikaze. If you're interested, please feel free to watch it.
And please
watch
direct
it.
all complaints at Mitchell.
Yes.
Yeah, direct all complaints at Mitchell. It's all his fault.
Good night, folks. Good night.
Wow. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm back.
Learned so much about you, Mitchell.
All right. So now that we know principles of animation and we've learned from people that are really way better at this than me, we can actually go into Blender and we can start to learn how to do some of this stuff ourselves. So here we are in Blender. Does everybody else have their blend files? It should look like this. Or it shouldn't look like this guy, but it should look it's more similar to this somewhat with the T-pose and the armature. First thing we're going to do is we are going to get it set up to look like this, and I'll go over how to do that real quick. So I'm going to go here. If you are in a pose that's not the T-pose, you can do with me Alt-G and Alt-R. And now we're back to normal standard pose. From here, we want to get our guy into a stride position, so where he looks like he's in the middle of a run, because we're going to start him off at the beginning. Hold on. Better now. 'Tis good now. Okay, cool. Sorry about that. Yeah, so you should be able to control 90% of your model with your wrists and heel IKs. So as you'll see here, I can just kind of move these guys along the x-axis, rotate them along the x-axis to get it about 90 degrees. We'll do negative so the thumb's pointing up. So there we go. We can rotate that around the z-axis 90 degrees, negative so it's pointing forward, like that. Now he's pointing forward. We can move it down some and move it back along the y-axis, like about there. Scoot our elbow in, scoot our wrist in, like that. And you try to just use G and R and your X, Y, Z keys to kind of move it around and get it set into a nice position like that, like so. Move this out a little bit, like there we go. The menu that I am on right now. And someone's in wireframe. So the wireframe, yes, is hold Z. And the menu that I'm in right now is animation. So you should be in normally layout. So this is what yours would look like normally, I'm assuming. And I am in the animation section. So you go there. And yours won't have this bad run thing right here. It should just be the dope sheet. But you guys are going to have multiple of these. You're just going to have one, so you can leave it on the dope sheet, and it should work the same. The action editor is just so I can have multiple animations because I've made some pre-made ones for what we're going to be doing right now. Then we're going to get do same dealio over here. Move this guy forward, rotate along the z-axis 90 degrees, along the y-axis 90 degrees, negative, so thumb's pointing up. And then we'll move this guy forward some, move him down just a little bit. Maybe rotate the hand back up. That. Then we can move him in some. Take our arm, our elbow here and move it down. There we go. So now we have our arms. Well, let me fix that. Right, now we have our arms kind of set out like that. All right. Now we're going to want to do our legs. Does everyone else have their arms like this? My chat keeps disappearing. I can't see if anyone's saying anything. Just G and R on the bones? Yeah. Yeah. So click on your heel IK, should be the ones that are sticking out of your body. Not the ones that are floating, but the ones that I got, like the one I got highlighted right here and here. And yeah, just use G to move it and R to rotate it. And S would be scale, but we do not want to do that. If you do accidentally scale, just hit Alt S and that should undo any scaling. All right. Anyone else see black rectangles on the screen? I think that might be the me opening up the chat window and everything, because it like pops up in front. I for whatever reason, every time I can't like click on Blender, it'll just close the chat window. I don't know what's going on, so bear with me. I'll try and keep it out of the way of the important stuff. All right, so I think everyone's got the basic gist of this. I'm gonna go ahead and move on. I'll try and go slow though. So we're gonna go ahead and move our knees forward a little bit so we have room for our legs to do their thing. Let's see, this arm is back, so we're gonna wanna move this leg back. So we're gonna grab our heel, and Y is our back for right now. We're gonna pull it back and then raise it up. Oop. Not that far, we're gonna pull it back to about there. Want to have a bit of a bend in your leg, about like that. And then you can rotate the heel. This is important. Don't rotate the foot, because last time when we rigged it, we made sure that we could rotate the heel to control the foot. And if you rotate the foot itself, it will break things. You can rotate the toes, just don't rotate the green thing. So this is safe. This is safe. This is not safe. Do not rotate that. We can go like that, and then normally rotate. This will be a little bit curled back or flat more, like that. Well, actually, this will be on the ground. So this should be a little bit more flat. So if we look at, if I go to numpad 3, should be everyone's side view here, you can see I want to get this flat. And we're going to want to rotate on the x-axis because that is what we're looking into. So if I go here, you'll see the red line. We want to rotate on the x-axis. All right. Make sure I'm not losing anything on. I don't see anything else in chat. That's good. All right. We're going to want to GZ or GY, move our feet forward and up, maybe back some so it can go down. All right, just about like that. So we got a nice, good, long stride there. And that is our basic run, just like that. It'll probably help to rotate our foot down a little bit, not too far, but a little bit, because he's getting ready to set anticipation, because he's getting ready to step back on the ground. All right. So now we have our first pose. I hope this does not break my thing. I can, yes, okay, good. Didn't break it. All right, so this is my first pose. You're gonna wanna, if it's not already, you can grab the parent bone, which should be your hip down here in the bottom middle, and that'll move everybody, or you could just hit A and move everybody. And you want to move your guy down, so where his foot's basically right on this line. So if you hit 3, I want to move him to where he's just above the y-axis, because we're going to call that ground for right now. So it sort of looks like he's actually running on the ground. It'll help with the visualization part of it. All right, now we have our pose, hopefully. And now that we have our pose, we're going to select all of our bones with A to select all, and then we're going to click, you can right click, and the hotkey, as you can see right there, is I. So if you don't want to right click, you can just click I, or right click and click insert keyframe, and location, rotation, and scale for your first one. If you go back and change only the location or just the rotation or something, you can pick any of these singularly, but if you just want to do everything at once, it's fine to just click lot rod scale. And boom, that's all the bones have all their things down here. I can pull this up. Every bone has got its position logged. All right. I see nothing in chat, so we're good. All right, so that's all of it in the first thing. And now that we have our first stride, we can do this great little thing called copying the pose. Then we move down, let's have this over 30 frames. So we'll go from 0 to 30, because that's what Blender likes to work in. And we're going to want to paste the pose. And then hit I again, or right click, insert keyframe, lot rod scale. Now these orange lines here are just where you're not changing anything. So where things will stay the same. Since I'm not changing the position right now, it's just gonna have orange lines all the way down the list. But we're about to change that. So in the middle, we're going to go here and we're gonna paste the X flipped pose. So this is our opposite side. So this should put the opposite foot and arm forward. It should look just the same, but just the other direction. Like that, X flip pose. Just like that. It said copy buffer is in for, how do you log it again? I missed that. Okay, go over a few things here. So I gotta do this again. So when you have everything, you're going to make sure that you click A to select all of your bones. And then hit I, and then lot rat scale, like that. Now our guy will do some weird shenanigans there. He'll do a nice little Scooby-Doo run. It'll look kind of wonky because he's not really moving up and down. Right. In between these, at about, I think, 8 and, oh, got another. Let's try this chat. He looks like Shaggy, kind of. Yeah. All right, so here we're going to want to select our bottom bones, so our legs and abdomen and everything. And we're going to want to do Alt-G and Alt-R so that he's standing at a neutral position. But we do not want to mess with our arms, so make sure you only do the bottom. Right, so now we're back in a normal standing position. So that'll be our middle part where now he should be in the mid between two steps. So we'll hit A again, I, lot rat scale. Now we have a middle bit. So we can kind of iterate through this. You'll see on the side, he'll get to the neutral position and then he'll take another step. And then we can just duplicate this since it's the same for each one and put it about 8 frames after this one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8 there. There we go. It's a basic run animation. Not very good, right? How are we going to breathe some life into this? Well, good thing that we know now the 12 principles of animation. So the things that there are a couple things that we can do. Now, these, some of you will already notice that he does have a little bit of squash and stretch with his going up and down while he's running. What are some other things that we can do? I will start by adding 1 or 2. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add, whenever we run, we actually lean into our stride. So I'm going to do about, how do we flip it to do the run thing again? Copy, paste, exit, pose, but it doesn't seem to play correctly. Same, I haven't figured out copying. It's just static for me. Okay, a lot of stuff there. So let's hit A. So make sure whenever you're messing around with inserting keyframes and everything that you're selecting all your bones, so it should be all highlighted in blue. That way, whenever you insert the keyframes with I, you'll have this whole list of things and not just 2 bones. Because if you'll see, if I click 1 bone here, it'll just show like 2 things. So I want to make sure I have all the bones selected when I inset. Then for copying, while I have all the bones selected, I can go here and click copy. So I can copy this pose. If I wanted to paste the pose, I can go and paste the pose. So we can go here, right? And I can go here and I can paste pose just like that. I'm not going to insert that, so it should reset. Stay the same. So if you ever want to pose to stay how you changed it, I would have to paste. If I wanted just to stay like this, I would then have to insert the keyframe, but I'm not going to do that. All right. And then if I want it to be the opposite here, I can paste the X flip pose. Right, so I got paste pose, paste X flip pose. We're gonna keep it about right there though.
Oh yeah, I just did the thing where I copy flipped it and then tried to add a new keyframe at 30 and it just added a second one, but it just forced it identical to the first. And when I try to overwrite that with the previous one, it also changes the first one.
That's
it doesn't
interesting.
like, yeah, it changes both at the same time. It won't do an individual.
Are you making sure that you're moving across the timeline? Like
yeah, I have 2 dots, one at 30, one at 0. And if I select one,
2 dots.
Then, well, like as in 2 columns of dots.
Oh, okay, my bad.
But then whenever I change one, it changes both of them for some reason.
Let me, I duplicated this, so that might be something that's happening. Let me paste the X-flip pose here. And then see if that, no. Okay, well, I didn't insert the keyframe, that's right. Well, I have this one, so I'll paste the X-flip pose and then hit I to insert location, rotation, scale. All right, that should be back to normal. That should be the same thing. Ah, but that's still opposite. So I'm not having that issue.
Okay, so I just did it 2 more times. The first time it didn't change anything, and the second time it did. So I don't really know what fixed it, but apparently it worked.
Okay.
Sometimes
well,
programs be like that.
they really do. They really do. This is there's a lot of complex stuff going on. Sometimes there's some small detail that you did that you didn't even know you did, and it ruins it. I've messed up entire tutorials that way. It sucks, but it happens. But glad that you have it fixed now. Yeah, there we go. So now we got a guy that's running around, but he's a little bit bland. You'll see this is very similar if I load up my bad run here. It's a little bit slower, but it's the same dealio without the messed up hand. So how are we going to improve this? One thing we can do is add the leaning. So you do not want to mess around with this because this will lean your whole model a little bit. You can actually, it's not bad. Let's mess around with the pelvis actually. So let's say I want to rotate this along the y-axis because that's this axis here. So RY to rotate along the y-axis. And then we are going to pick a degree. Let's see, how much is 10 degrees? 10 degrees is a little bit too much. Let's say 5 degrees. Nope, that's 5 degrees. 5 degrees sounds good. Okay. And think whenever you're running, you would lean into where you're going to step next. So he's leaning in the right direction. So we're going to hit enter to confirm our rotation there. And then we're going to hit A, I, lat rad scale. So now that's good. And do the same thing here. We can grab our pelvis and do R was 5 degrees, I think. But since we want it to go the opposite way, we want to be this way. It's about like that. Hit enter. And then A, I, lat rad scale. And now it's set. Right. And then these two are supposed to be the same anyways, so we can just delete these keyframes. And then I can go here, duplicate, yoink, throw them over there. And there we go. Now he's got some step to him. Look at that. That's much better. But his head's kind of doing this. And when we walk, that would throw us off and we would throw up probably because we get motion sick. So what we as humans do to fix this problem is we do this wonderful new scientific invention called rotating our neck the opposite direction.
Mitchell,
Yeah, what's up?
before you do that, can you show how you straighten everything again?
Yes. Okay. So if you want to, do you want to straighten everything? Because if you straighten everything, you're going to probably put like your hands and your feet back.
We got questions to say, how do you get the standing keyframes? How do you just straighten the feet?
Okay, that's what's happening. My chat is not doing the little orange notification box, so I'm not seeing when people are putting this stuff in there. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just static. How do I reset the position and the scale again? Position and scale and rotation is Alt-G. But for that, make sure that you don't do it on selecting all the bones because that'll set you back to T-pose, essentially. So you want to select it on the bones that you want to undo. Click that bone specifically. So if I click here, right, and I do Alt-R, it'll kick back. Right? But I didn't undo the rotation on the hands or anything. And I'm not going to set that so it'll go back to where it was. Now it's back to being rotated. If I hit everything and I do Alt-R, then that happens, and that looks gross, and we don't like that. So make sure you're specific with that sort of stuff. How do you get the transform box up? That is N. So whenever you're in the thing, N. And then I think tools is T. So if you want this little bar, it's T. So T and N. N as in nougat, T as in Tyrannosaurus Rex. All right. how do you loop between set frames? So there's this little box down here at the bottom, and it says start and end. I believe everyone, I actually forgot to mention this. I think everyone starts at like 250. So if you want it to loop, it'll automatically loop. You just got to kick it all the way back to wherever you want it. So mine ends at 30. So it'll loop back around to 0 and start again. Yeah, that's probably like having it be, if you do like that, it'll probably look like that for everybody. That might be why everyone's is static, because it keeps going. So yeah, make sure you have it set to the correct amount there. All right. There we go, we got some leaning, so that's good. So now we'll go through here and we'll try and do our undo our leaning. So get our neck, R5. That was what we did, and that's the opposite direction. So we'll click that, we'll hit A, I, flat right scale. Go to the middle. Click R, Y. Oh, -5, that, A, I, flat right scale. There we go. And then we can go here, delete these, go here, duplicate these, put them at 30, and there we go. And this should, look at him. He's doing the run. That looks pretty good. Not terrible, could be better. I have some more stuff that I could go into, but we are running a little bit short on time. So if anyone has any suggestions, I'll move on to that phase where I'll let you guys, there's a couple in the outline if you want to suggest those, but let's go over some questions. All right, I might have missed that, but how do you get the standing keyframes? Oh, okay, the standing keyframes. I understand this. You guys are talking about
Yes, those.
Okay.
Yes.
My bad, I forgot to go over this again. So when you are in this section, you're going to want to hover over all your lower bones like that. And then you do the Alt-G, Alt-R to reset them. But you only want to do it on the bottom bones because your arms are going to still be in motion. So here, you want to have your arms to where they're still in motion. And usually, if you have these set up right, you're going to want to do this in the midpoint. So if I go here, you'll see how in the midpoint, the arms are already at a specified position here. I didn't even have to move that to that position from here to here. They're not at the full position here, and they're not at the rest position here. They're in this mid position. That's essentially what you're doing with these two. Because they're polar opposites, the midpoint will have them to where each of the hands is in exact, opposite sides. So they'll be like right next to each other. So I'm actually gonna hit A real quick. I'm gonna copy this pose. I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna paste the X flip pose here, I, lot right scale. This is because since this is at an odd interval, this one starts with this left arm here front, and then we move into this pose, and I just want to keep that symmetrical so that whenever we do it again, we have the right arm first, and that way it's sort of evened out. Let's see, chat has more things to say. Got it, thanks. Does anyone else have any questions? I'll leave the floor open to that. That's a basic run animation, very basic. There's some other stuff you can do with rotating the hands some. And I can actually open up a different blend file and go over some of the other ones that I've made for a different character of mine so we can get into some of the other stuff. I'll actually do that. That's a good idea. So I'm going to stop my share real quick. Oh, chat. Hold on. Ethan Tran, what's up? So I addressed this earlier. Yes. Sorry if I missed it, bud. Shouldn't the arm that's back be with the foot that's front? Should it? I don't know if it should.
The way that the arms, like the left arm moves forward at the same time the left leg moves forward, but when you run, your left arm will go forward and your left leg will go backwards.
Are you sure about that?
I'm pretty sure.
Let me check. Not doubting you, just want to make sure. Okay, yeah, I guess, yeah, okay, my bad. Yeah, all right, so to fix that then, what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab our arms. So I have all my arm bones here, and I have all my arm bones here, including the IKs back there. Remember to get those. We're gonna copy this position, copy pose. We're gonna paste the X flipped pose, just like that. And then AI, lot rod scale. And then on these guys, we can just do the same thing where we paste the normal pose, because it's not X flip this time, just like that. AI, lot rod scale. And then do the same thing that we always do to make things easier here. Delete those, duplicate, run them over, put them there, and then we go. Sorry about that. Now it should be all good. Is that better? All right. Sorry to have bothered you, Ethan. So yeah, I think my other model does that. Does it like this the correct way? I just forgot about that this time. So I'm going to close this file that you guys are working on. There's some other things we can do, but I just want to get to this because it's a little bit easier to kind of go over stuff. So I'll stop my share real quick. Close this. I'll save it. Make sure you save. I think Blender will prompt you, but in case it doesn't, make sure you save. This is a game I've been working on in my spare time, but I have a good couple of animations that I've worked on here, and I can kind of show them off. Be a good way to go into this. So let's check chat here, as people seem good. All right. So here is the normal run. No, okay, I'm doing it the wrong way. Damn. But another thing here that you can add to the run is you'll see that my characters lean forward. So whenever people are walking, or if they're not walking, hey, it's okay, maybe robots walk. Yeah, maybe they do, who knows. Yeah, another thing you'll see is how whenever I come forward, my elbow goes out. And that helps sell some motion. You'll see the twist, the neck stays sharp, just like we were doing. He leans forward whenever he's moving, because he's got that, kind of whenever that runner's stance. I can go into a couple other of these. That's one of those things that would look really weird if it was a human, but it looks fine for the robot. Yeah, okay. I guess it's that uncanny valley thing when my sister and my brother-in-law were talking about. So here's another one I have. I have the idle animation. This is just sort of him standing and looking and sort of bouncing. You'll see the knees are kind of bending a little bit, and he's looking either way, standing at the ready. Oh, this is a 60 frame animation. There we go. Everything else I'd done in 30. Idle just happens to be in 60. And then this is probably the one I'm most proud of, is my jump animation. So you'll see here if I'll go through, this is that start and stop thing where you'll see I'll start with just very low, but then right before the jump, there's a shit ton of keyframes, and then they'll space out. Yeah, it looks fucking good. I'm really proud of it. But that's the power of sitting there and actually getting everything moved out. I watched a couple of videos. It helps to kind of have some reference. You can always get pictures and stuff of like mid-jump people and model by reference and just pose to the picture in wireframe mode. That's always helpful. Are the animations easy to import into Blender? I made them in Unity. Yeah. Depending on what you use, there's a specific type of thing that's like made easy. I think it's called Rigify. That is like streamlined for Unity. That's really nice if you can find that. I don't know how to do that. This is a little bit more difficult to do in Unity. It's actually something I'm still trying to figure out how to do. But you have to do what's called an animation controller. So you have you have to basically code a little control box. So whenever I press this button, play this animation. Whenever I press this button, play this animation. And you just have to set that up. And then once you do, it runs pretty well. And then Unity's armatures are different than the armatures you have here. So you have to basically tell Unity, yes, this is an armature here. It's not your armature. I know that you don't like this armature, but use it as a guide to make your own armature. And then this guy's also a little bit weird because he doesn't have feet. He just has the little, he only has leg bones. So he doesn't have the feet bones like you guys do on normal models. So that caused some errors. But you'll see the anticipation where I get the legs bend down and the arms pull up. You can kind of see that here. I can just like that. And then he springs back up. He got that squash and stretch right there. And then as he's flying in the air, things widen out, things sit. And then as soon as I have a landing animation as well. So now he's in the air. That starts from the end of the jump. And then we land. That one's not as good. It should kind of whap down faster, but I've been trying to get it to, it's a complex motion. But yeah. Those are just a good way to take a look at how all the principles of animation can make something as simple, which would start, I think I started out with just having the legs bend and him hopping up in the air. And I took a look at it and did iterative improvement. You know, you do one thing, see how it looks, take a look at it, think, how could I improve this? Do another thing, just like we were doing earlier with adding bits and pieces, like, you know, the leaning and the head bobbing with the leaning. And then, you know, we switch the arms around to make it look better. All those iterative improvements, that's what you're looking for. You'll never get it perfect on the first try. So yeah, I think any lingering questions aside, that is an intro to animation. And hopefully you guys have at least a little thing to show for it, you know, with the basic run animation and an understanding that you can build on with some tutorials. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk of sorts.